Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to our webinar today. We're going to go ahead and get started right on time, but I wanted to give you a couple minutes to go ahead and log on. So today we are talking a little bit about transforming to employment and giving you the tools to make it happen. I want to introduce myself. My name is Jen Quigley. I am a quality enhancement specialist for the Council on Quality and Leadership. And I have worked in social services for about 17 years. I have worked in different capacities within that, within residential and employment, as a licensor, case manager. But one of the things that I really love is actually working in employment and helping organizations to transform. I've presented at multiple national conferences all about data and employment services. I've also had the pleasure in working in the state of Oregon during the time of the lawsuit versus sheltered workshops, which caused us to really go through a lot of transformation. And I was really blessed to get a lot of training and mentoring through that journey. The other thing that I've also done is I have worked with multiple different organizations who have wanted to transform their services and have needed a little bit extra help in certain areas to be able to make that happen. So I'm really excited today to speak to you all on an important and relevant topic today. First, a little housekeeping. We have Kathy who's joining us today, helping behind the scenes with some questions and answers. So if you have any technical difficulties at all or have any questions that you really want to ask, feel free to go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A box. And Kathy will be monitoring that and making sure that we address any questions that you might have and issues with technical difficulties. We've also packed a whole lot of information into this 1 hour time frame. So we're going to really try our hardest to get to some questions at the very end. Feel free to type any questions that you have into the box and we will try to address those. But I want to make sure you know we might not have time, but we will be addressing questions at the end if we do have. All right, so I know that there are a few people on this webinar that might not know exactly who CQL is. I wanted to give you just a little bit of information about who we are. We are an organization that does training, certification, and accreditation for organizations throughout the US and internationally. One of the things that we focus on, so CQL assists communities, systems, and organizations to help people discover and define their own quality of life, measure personal quality of life for individuals, organizations, and systems, and improve the quality of life for people with disabilities, people with mental illness, and older adults, and the people, organizations, and communities that support them. So we really believe in organizations helping people to define quality of life, and we do that through our personal outcome measures, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But we also help people to really individually define that quality of life, and organizations to increase the quality of services and systems that they provide to people. All right, so for today, today's agenda is that we are going to talk a little bit about why transformation is important, so a case for transformation. Then we're going to move on to transformational leadership model. So what qualities do we need to have in order to inspire change within our organizations? Then we're going to talk about a specific transformation plan development. What is needed for you to be able to start along the path of transforming from site-based services to community-based employment services. Then we're going to do a little wrap-up after that. Some of these areas, just given the time limit of an hour, we're not going to be able to dive really deeply into them. But again, if some of them you want to get a lot more information about, please feel free to send a question or send us an email saying, hey, I'd like to get more information on what a communication plan should look like, and we can help you out. All right, so why change? Why is change important? So everyone loves change, right? Not really. Some people thrive on change and some people don't. We talk about that with our personal outcome measures with continuity. For me, I thrive on change just because that's who I was. I was raised my dad was in the Navy and we moved constantly. And so that was something that just kind of is in my blood. So I like trying new things and moving all the time and changing stuff. But as organizations, change can be scary for people. And if not done in a very strategic and systematic way, it can cause a lot of angst for people. So let's talk a little bit why do we want to cause this angst for people? Why do we want to make some of these changes that might turn people's worlds completely upside down? So you've already heard a lot of different reasons behind changing from site-based to community-based. I know you've heard things such as the new HCBS rules, WIOA, things like that. Also, maybe the widespread discussions about whether or not the 14C sub-minimum wage certificate should continue or not. Those are all things that we've heard a lot about. I want to give you a little bit more information, some more tools in your tool belt to be able to talk to people about why change and transformation is so important. So I think understanding that change is really important to get people's buy-in. When you tell someone this is what we're going to do, a lot of times the first question is, why are you going to do that? What's your reasoning behind, changing the way we've been doing stuff for the last 20 years? And so as we address some of that why, then you'll get more buy-in for people. The other thing that I think that knowing the reason behind transformation is important is that a lot of times as leaders, we come to our organizations with different biases. And we either have those biases based on our past experiences or have them because we have internal motivation to make certain decisions. And so it's important for us to recognize whenever we do have some of those decision-making biases to really get the information behind the information so we can, the information behind the change so we can effectively make those changes. So one of those biases I think comes into play with this transformation from site-based to community-based is what's called a sunk cost effect bias. Now what that is that when someone's looking at making some big decisions, they're less likely to make the right decision when they're looking at how much cost they have sunk into previous decisions. For example, I'm a CEO of a large organization, and I've just recently acquired a smaller organization that was really struggling. Now, as I work with that smaller organization to help them become better, I've put a lot of resources into them and to continue to increase their quality. But at a certain point, it might not be effective for me to continue with that organization. It's less likely for the CEO that actually acquired that organization to make that decision than for a new CEO that comes on to say, hey, I'm looking at this objectively and I don't think this is a good thing for us to do. So if I have personally put in my personal resources as far as time and planning into something, or if the organization has put in financial resources into it, I'm less likely to make that. So that relates to our services as if we have built this large building or really worked on getting great training and education for our staff that is based on site-based services, I'm less likely to go ahead and make that change. Excuse me, sorry. Whereas if we're able to really make a case for the transformation, we can identify that sunk cost bias and we can start to overcome it. All right, so the first thing I wanted to start with was a personal story. I always love personal stories about transformation because they're really what makes us do what we do. And so is Laura ready to share her story? I just want to make sure before I introduce.
She's not quite ready yet.
Okay. Let's come back to Laura's story. It's a really good one, I promise. So a little bit of anticipation there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about pre-vocational services. Now, pre-vocational services can mean a whole range of different things. They can mean anything from pre-vocational as far as site-based sheltered work to learning how to become a good employee. And this could be from site-based to even some of the more integrated community-based pre-vocational services. So we're going to take a poll here based on pre-vocational services. Let me launch that for you. Okay, so which one of these statements do you think is true? Successful participation in pre-vocational services increases integrated employment wages. The second one is there's no relationship between participation in pre-vocational services and integrated employment wages. And then the last one is there is evidence that pre-vocational services are negatively correlated, which means that as pre-vocational services increase, wages and employment decrease. So if you do more pre-vocational, then your employment wages will decrease. Which one of these statements do you think is true? Now we're going to take a few seconds to vote. All right, about 5 more seconds. Get in your votes while you can. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. A few more people trickling in now. All right, so based on your poll, you can see these results. Most people thought that the successful participation in pre-vocational services actually increases integrated employment wages. And then the next most is quite a bit less, 24% thought that there was evidence that pre-vocational services are negatively correlated to integrated employment wages. So let's see what the actual results are. I do have a study that was completed that talks a little bit about that. So this was a study that was completed using an observational approach to evaluate the impact of pre-vocational services on actual wages once people have a job. It was completed using data from the years of 2005 to 2010 and information gathered from New York Integrated Employment and Supported Employment Report Data Management System. So what these researchers found, excuse me, is that when you use the trained in place, which is that pre-vocational support, the average hourly wage for people was $6.33. If you actually use the place then train model, which would be customized employment, community integrated employment, placing the person and then training them in place, their wages actually were about 14% higher when they were placed then trained than when they were trained then placed. What does this mean? This is a rhetorical question, but what does this mean for all these organizations that are really focusing on developing some of that site-based pre-vocational services? What it means to me is that really our emphasis should be on placing people in jobs that they have chosen based on their themes of employment, and really supporting them to be trained there at the site can mean an increase in wages for them. The other interesting fact that this research came up with was that when people are placed in jobs, it's more often that the employer is actually paying the wage of the person when it's a place then train situation. So as you see, there's 21%, almost 21% more people are paid by the employer of the place that they work at when they do the place then train. And that's really important because I think that when employers are willing to pay directly the people that they're employing, it shows value, that they're willing to take a risk and be the employer on record of those people. The good thing about the data was it showed that most people are actually in jobs are doing the place then train by quite a bit. All right, so the answer to that based on that data would have been the last one, where there's actually a negative correlation between if people participate in pre-vocational services and their wages. So kind of interesting, huh? All right, so this next one, here's another reason to add to your tool belt, is really when we're looking at deciding what types of services to provide, we should be asking people who are receiving those services, what do they want? Now, when we look at the data from our personal outcome measure interviews, and this is from about 1,400 different data points, we really see that at the top of the list there is competitive employment. So while it's not the highest number of people that are employed, it is the highest amount of people that are choosing to work in the places that they're working. And by choice, at CQL, we believe that choice has to be an informed choice. So in order for people to choose where to work, they have to have what we call the 3 E's. And that is education, exposure, and experience. So they have to know what all the other options are and have to have had sufficient information and experience with those choices to be able to make a truly informed choice. So where you see the highest numbers of people participating are in sheltered work, day programs, and enclaves. It's actually some of the lowest numbers of where people really want to work. So there's another reason. People are wanting to work in more community employment type situations. All right, so going back to Laura, so I recently had the opportunity to listen to Laura speak about her experience within transformation, and I was really, really touched by it. And so I met Laura recently at the Arc of Putnam, New York, and I wanted her to be able to have the chance to tell you and for you guys to be motivated by her story. So here's Laura.
Yeah. Okay. I worked at Punnett ARC for 9 years, and I didn't like when I was told the workshop was closing and changing to they have classes. I also didn't like when I was informed that I needed to participate in some community experience to find alternate work outside of the workshop. My compound counselor, Marie Raptis, told me it could be fun and that I have to try new things, but I told her I didn't want to. I basically refused, which is true.
Yes.
After returning from my summer vacation, I met Anne Greenfield. She was very funny, outgoing, and she had a great sense of humor, which is also true. I found her to be unpredictable and amazing. She was going to be my job coach. I got along with Anne immediately. We had both just returned from vacation, and both of our schedules had a drastic change. We talked and laughed about it on our way to Big Lots, my first community experience. Anne doesn't let anything get her down or bother her. We got along so well despite our new schedules. She made me feel comfortable in an otherwise nerve-wracking situation, and I did well. The next day, we went to Summers Manors, and Anne told me she was a different person while I was there. I was very happy, energetic, and bubbly, and I thought I found my place. I enjoyed Goodwill later that afternoon as well. My next job site was up on a ridge. Anne told me I was a natural with the residents. I taught them a new card game and I played bingo. Returning to Park Central, I guessed to Maria how excited I was and how much I enjoyed going out in the community. Anne expressed to Maria how well I adapted and that the nursing homes thus far were where I found would fit best. She was amazed and impressed at my hidden talents. I enjoy writing stories and drawing, and I love to teach the residents games. Mercedes Jr., my other job coach, has an awesome personality and a great sense of humor. We have so much fun too when we go out in the community. If it wasn't for Marie pushing me to try new things, and for Mercedes' very funny sense of humor, and of course Anne for helping and encouraging me, I wouldn't love where I work. Did I mess that up?
You did a great job. Great, thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so one of the things that I loved about Laura's statement is that she was really apprehensive, weren't you, Laura?
Yeah, I was. Very.
A little worried, but now, how much do you love your job?
100%.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And Peppy, thank you for supporting Laura. And hopefully we have lots of more examples of you going forward too. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we have heard a lot about why we should transform. So you have some more information to be able to share with your organizations on why this is an important step. Now let's talk a little bit about why being a transformational leader is important. So we know why we need to change. Some of the first things that we need to learn about is how to be that change and how to change as leaders to be able to help our organizations get on board with those types of change. All right, so the Transformational Leadership Model was first developed by James Burns in 1978. The main idea of his leadership style is that both the superior and subordinate, so the leaders and the followers, work for uplifting each other and improving the morale and motivation. So it's really a lot about feeling-based leadership, but it's also some about motivating people in the right direction and helping them get there and see the vision. There are four main components with this, which are usually referred to as the 4 I's. So the first two are very closely related. The first one is idealized influence, and this is where the leader serves as an ideal role model for followers. They walk the they walk the talk. So they do everything that they say they're going to do, and they really are models for the organization going forward. And then along with that is inspirational motivation. This is where transformational leaders have the ability to inspire and motivate followers. These first two combined is what's really important for the organizational leader to have charisma, and it helps them to have charisma. So if they help people with motivation, and they also kind of use their influence in positive ways, they're able to really help organizations move forward. The next two is individualized consideration and intellectual stimulation. So individualized consideration is all about transformational leaders demonstrating genuine concern for the needs and feelings of followers. So really finding out what that one person needs to make the transformation and to get on board, and having those individualized things. And then intellectual stimulation is just what it sounds like. So it's helping followers be innovative, helping them think outside the box and bring up questions and suggestions and being supported in that. If you're making changes, it's really important to listen to information from all levels. So from the top of the organization to the bottom, really helping them to be able to think outside the box and be innovative. All right. So with transformational leadership, as you're trying to lead a change, there are 5 main characteristics within this transformational leadership that are important for the leaders to emulate. The first one is that transformational leaders keep their ego in check. So it's not about them, it's about the mission, vision, and values. It's about where we're going to go. It's about the vision for the organization. So it's not about the leader themselves and how great they are and how their status improves, but how the organization together is going to move forward. The next thing is that transformational leaders demonstrate self-management. So change is a really difficult time for people, and a leader really needs to self-manage their reactions to change. So if something might come up that's a roadblock that's really frustrating, it's important for that leader. It's okay to be frustrated, but not to show that frustration to everyone. That could derail the transformation process. Transformational leaders also need to have the ability to take the right risks. Remember, we talked a little bit about that sunk cost effect. And so knowing when moving away from that sunk cost into the more risky new stuff is really important, which goes along with transformational leaders make difficult decisions. So they're willing to take those risks, make those decisions to make positive change come forward. The next one is that transformational leaders share collective organizational consciousness. Okay, that's an interesting one. So not only do leaders actually help people have that collective organizational consciousness, but they ensure that new people coming in, stakeholders, anyone kind of shares that vision focus for the organization. The next thing, and this is all about the charisma of the transformational leader, is that transformational leaders are inspirational. In order to do the hard work to make those changes, leaders need to show some inspiration to people around them and to help them to be able to share the vision and to know that they can get there eventually. You know, even in talking with Pepe and Laura and their organization, there was a lot of discussion about some hesitation to the change and what's going to happen. And even throughout the whole change, they talked a little bit about how they were worried that, is this really going to happen? But looking back, it did happen. And their organization was able to transform from a sheltered workshop to more integrated services because they held tight to that vision and continued to go through some of those challenging times. The next thing is transformational leaders entertain new ideas. Remember, we talked a little bit about that intellectual stimulation, that they're organizational leaders who really are the yes and people, the people that say, okay, that's a great idea, let's see what we can do with it. And not all ideas might come to fruition, but at least they fully explore those ideas. The next thing is that transformational leaders demonstrate adaptability. And so within change, you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to really have that focus be good and true, but change the path to that focus as needed. When barriers come up, you need to go around those barriers or climb over those barriers and not be stopped at those barriers. The next thing is that transformational leaders are proactive. They're not the organization organizations or leaders that are just sitting there waiting for something to happen. I think sometimes within our organizations, we often are the firefighters, and we wait for something to flare up and then we go and we take care of it. But really, transformational leaders have to look to the future and have to project and predict some of those things that might come up within your transformation and really be proactive about dealing with those. And then the last one is that transformational leaders lead with a vision. They continually help people to refocus on that vision and keep that vision as the center point of the transformation. So right now, one of the prevalent leadership models that a lot of organizations and just people throughout the world use is this transactional leadership model. Now, transactional leadership model is really all about the here and now and how to extrinsically motivate people. So as is demonstrated in this cartoon here, this is all about if you do a good job, you get benefits. If you do a bad job, you get punishments. And so a lot of leaders will lead in this way is, if you don't show up to work on time, I'm going to write you up. If you do something bad, you're going to get fired, that kind of stuff. Whereas really to make good transformational change, you need to focus more on the transformational leadership. Some of the assumptions with transactional leadership that we see are that all employees are just motivated by rewards and punishments, which isn't always true, especially in our field, I think. Another assumption is that subordinates have to obey the orders of the superior, that the subordinates are not self-motivated. And then finally, the goal of the follower is to strictly obey the instructions of the leader. Now, do you see how this this type of leadership can possibly not be helpful when trying to increase the morale of the people around you, especially as this model calls the subordinates? And so that's why we need to recognize when we are acting in that transactional way and really, really try to move more into the transformational leadership model. All right, so here are some key differences in those two models. I'm not going to read all through it, but I'm going to talk to you about a couple of them. We talked a little bit about how a transformational leader is proactive. On the opposite of that, a transactional leader is reactive. So they are just putting out fires and they're not looking for the future. They're not looking at trends in the industry and seeing where they can be leaders there. The style there is very bureaucratic, very much like I'm going to tell you what to do. And then transformational is very charismatic. So we're trying to go forward as a team and work together. The part that I love with transformational leadership is also that you can have more than just one leader. So the new person that started a week ago that has some great ideas, they can be the leader. It's not just from the top down. And also that transformational leadership helps for innovation rather than just focusing on the planning and execution of tasks. All right. And it's important to know the difference so that you can really identify in yourself as you're leading change, what area you're focusing on and trying to really change some of those behaviors into the more transformational leadership behavior. All right, so if you are going to start to move towards transformation, or if you're someone that's really trying to figure out how do I get people on board and how do I become this transformational leader, this is a great resource that I myself listen to regularly on Audible. So it's a great lecture from Professor Michael Roberto. He's a Harvard-trained professor at Bryant University, and he has a bunch of his lectures on audio that you can listen to. The great thing about it too is it's not just a lecture, as we all remember from college days. He's actually a case study lecturer, so he will sit and tell stories about how this relates to different industries like Ford and Apple and that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to listen to. And it has helped me to really start to change the way I think about leadership. So it's a good resource there. All right, so we've talked a little bit about why we should change and how to become the leader of that change. Let's talk about the plan, right? We can't move forward with a plan unless, or with executing the vision unless we actually have a plan to move forward. So it's important that you have a tangible, very measurable plan to move forward within transformation. So once you've made the decision, start developing that plan. And let's talk a little bit about what the different areas of that plan should be. All right. Now, before you actually sit down and put words on paper what the plan is going to be, one thing that I highly, highly recommend is that you identify a mentor. Now, this can be an agency that's transformed in the past. This could be a subject matter expert who has seen transformations and knows some of the pitfalls of that. But it's really important for you to find someone that can help you navigate through some of those areas that might be different during this transformation. It's that been there, done that mentality. So this organization or this person has seen the transformation and what some of those pitfalls could be, and they can help you steer around those pitfalls or to be able to kind of walk through those. They've made lots of mistakes, but they've also had a lot of success, so they can help you with those, and you can learn from them so you don't make them also. And then they can also help to mentor you during challenging times. So when that parent is becoming a vocal advocate for not transforming, they can give you some tools that they've used in the past to be able to help you with that transformation. All right, once you've identified that mentor, the next very important step, I feel, is to develop or look at your mission, vision, and values. It's important that when you're changing how you do business, that you look at those and you reevaluate them to see if they really fit. Do they highlight the new direction of your organization or your services? Are they reflective of the philosophy that you have currently? I've seen a lot of organizations that have revamped their mission, vision, and values in multiple different ways. I will tell you though, some of the ways that are the most innovative and areas where the whole organization can get on board is when you include everybody in this process. So you invite DSPs, you invite leaders of the organization, stakeholders, and of course people supported into the room to talk about what the mission, vision, and values should be. Those can be some of the best meetings ever. When I was working in Oregon and we were starting towards transformation, I had a meeting just with my department, just with the employment department, and we came up with our own mission, vision, and values. We were part of a large organization, so we couldn't affect a lot of change there. But we did come up with our own mission, vision within our department. And I'll tell you, that's one of the things that even through the scary times of thinking, what's this going to look like in the future? I felt like that was one of the best meetings that we had. All right, so we'll do another poll here. It's kind of fun to have a little interaction. So let's pretend that we are part of an organization and we are thinking of moving in the direction of supported community employment away from site-based pre-vocational or day programs. All right, so let's pretend we are transforming from site-based pre-vocational services to community-based. Let's look at these different mission statements and see what you think would be the best. So these are actual mission statements that I just randomly pulled from different organizations. The first one is our mission is to provide meaningful, productive, and long-lasting careers in packaging industry to adults with developmental disabilities. The next one is improving the lives of people with disabilities through meaningful work and community inclusion. And then the last one, to provide recreation and social inclusion to people with IDD. It'll take a little bit of time to vote there. All right, let's take about 5 more seconds. All right. So let's see, it looks like most of you chose the mission of improving the lives of people with disabilities through meaningful work and community inclusion. I would highly agree with you on that. And so it's really important that you use this time to reevaluate that mission to make sure that it means what you want your services to look like in the future too. So great job. All right. All right, the next part. So we've already developed our mission, vision, and our values. It's all in line with where we're going to go. The next thing we need to do is figure out our communications plan. I'll tell you just from my experience, one of the biggest areas that causes a lot of angst for people is the communication of a transformation. So when all stakeholders aren't fully communicated what things are going to look like in the future, that's when they don't get the buy-in, and that's when they start to become maybe a little disgruntled, maybe just a little confused, but that communication plan is so important. Now, one of the #1 things I would personally recommend is that you consult someone who has a marketing communications background. I'll tell you, I thought that I knew a lot about this until I actually started working with some marketing communications people at my last organization and also with CQL that are amazing and really know and can look at the different outside views of what this communication plan needs to look like. So make sure that you develop that message and that you stand by that message. So the message should be consistent, and it should be very specific about who's saying what to when and how. It's also important that when you do talk to your organization, the different members of your organization, that they then have their own communication plan. So when a DSP is approached about how services are changing from site-based to community-based, they have some tools to talk about it to family members and case managers and outside stakeholders, so that they're not kind of left in the lurch saying, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say to them. So it's really important that you give them the communication tools also. There needs to be a consistent message from all levels of the organization. And you need to first get buy-in from them and then move forward with your communication to other people. Make sure that the communication is one of kind of faith and hope for the future, that things are going to be good. We're doing this because things are going to be better. All right, so here's an example of what a communication plan might look like. There are a lot of resources on the internet for this. This is just one that I found that I felt addressed most of the things that you might need in a communication plan. Again, I highly recommend that you work with a professional on this part of it. But it's really important that you, number one, identify the stakeholders. So who is going to be hearing the message? Who's the person that is the intended audience for that communication plan? And then what information do they need to hear? Is it about the change? Is it what it's going to look like for their son or daughter, or their schedule if they're a staff, that kind of stuff? It really needs to be detailed out. When they're going to hear about it, how they're going to hear about it, and how often they're going to hear about it. All of that is very important, and it's a document that should be looked at continually so that people can know what the plan is going forward with communication. But again, I say communication is probably one of the top areas that causes people a lot of concern within change. All right, the next step in your transformation plan, you'll have to address some resource allocation. So if you're currently have a lot of that sunk cost effect, if you have a lot of that sunk cost into your employees' training, that they've all been trained on how to be great site-based support services, maybe they have a special education teaching degree and know how to really teach people in a classroom on how to earn a job. They might need some additional resources to learn how to transfer those skills into the community when teaching people how to be placed and trained. The other thing is that a lot of places will have beautiful buildings, and they've spent a lot of money on these buildings. And it's hard to decide, okay, what do I do with this building now that I've spent all this money? So you need to go through and really find out where your resources are and what resource allocations need to change in order to really support that transformation. This is really hard for organizations to do because they have been so tied into the ways of doing the resource allocation in the past. The other thing that's important to look at is that sometimes, and not with all organizations and all funding services, but sometimes the way that we forecast revenue has to change too. So a lot of site-based services in the past, and this is changing a lot recently, but have been very stagnant funding sources. So you know that for Johnny, you're going to get X amount of dollars a day, and that really doesn't change because Johnny comes every day. Whereas when you transform into community-based employment, the funding there could be front heavy, could be back heavy, it could be, kind of here and there and not very consistent. So you have to get really good at forecasting what funding rates might look like for that one individual, and then spread that out to what you think it might be for everyone else. This is another area that we could spend a whole lot of time on how you can do that forecasting for community-based employment. But yeah, really looking at where you have all those allocated resources in one area that might need to change over to a whole different area when you are transforming your services. Excuse me. All right, the next area that we've already kind of talked about is staff development. So staff development and staff buy-in to your mission and vision is really important. This is where it can kind of make or break your transformation. Is number one, you've already gotten buy-in because you've had people come and participate in the mission, vision, and value redevelopment or evaluation. And now you have to kind of find out who has the right skills to move you forward into the new direction. When you go into an organization who's starting to transform, I think it's important to do that transformational leadership piece where you're meeting individually and seeing what the needs of that individual staff are. If you're doing that in a way that's meaningful, you can see the talents, the skills, and even some of the areas of support that your staff might need, and really develop plans for transformation for them individually. There are some situations where a staff who is really great at helping people, maybe in a piece rate situation, or helping people in arts in a day program, really has some very unique gifts that could be utilized in a community-based way that might need some direction on how to transfer those gifts from site-based to community-based. So it's really important that you sit down with your staff in a meaningful way and identify their strengths and their areas of improvement and start to fit them in places with the new transformation that makes sense to them. Now, you know, the elephant in the room, there might be some staff who will not get on board, who do not believe in your vision, who don't believe in your mission. And those are staff that you have to evaluate. Are they going to be on the bus of transformation? Or are you going to drop them off at the next site and hopefully help them to find a place that meets their needs a little bit better? So it's really about trying to identify strengths and opportunities of development for people. You know, I have supervised many different people over my years, and I have had situations where I've had people with very unique skills that might not have been very good at paperwork, but excel at work, talking to people. I could go into a room and come out with 5 jobs where no one else could do the same. And that's the person that I would very specifically give them some very specific job duties to really play up on their skills. The other thing that's really important to note here too is that you might need to provide some new and better training for people. So how to be more interpersonal, how to really talk to business owners, how to do kind of a needs analysis for business owners in a way that is helpful and supportive and they see the value of your services. Also, learning more things such as systematic instruction in the workplace, job coaching, marketing, job development, that kind of stuff. So really use that staff development plan to be able to find out what needs your staff have. All right, the next thing now, we've talked about resources and staff and all that. Let's talk about really important part. So planning and discovery. It's really important that during this transition that you take an individualized approach to helping people identify what their job of choice would be. You know, some of the pitfalls that you see during transformation is you see as people start to go into the community and start to make connections, then it's really easy once you start to make some of those really strong connections to start having people that want jobs go and just work at the connections that you currently have. And I would say that is a major pitfall. Do not, as you're starting the transformation, do not fall into that one, because what that does is that it does not help people to really choose where they work and to work in places that they're going to be motivated to continue to go to. And so there are a couple of things that you can use to find out what people really want to do as far as work. So one of the things I suggest that you use is the personal outcome measures, which we talked about in this webinar before, but it's on the visual on your left is really the 5 factors that we talk about within our personal outcome measure interviews. Now, personal outcome measure interviews are amazing for getting information about the person. And I think they're very relevant to employment work because we're really wanting to find all those areas where people might need extra support, or they might have some really big desires that a job can meet for them. And so this part of assessment and discovery is really important for people in order to really dig down and find out what's important to them. The next piece is that discovery process. So no matter what system you're using, whether it be discovery through Mark Gold & Associates or Discovering Personal Genius, it's really important that you use some type of an assessment. And I really feel that the personal outcome measures and discovery are really closely related. You can start off by doing a personal outcome measure that can then lead your discovery actions in the future. One thing that I hear a lot about this is that there's just not really any funding to do these things. And you know, one thing that we can really help you with is that if you are really wanting to have this individualized support and you're not finding funding to be able to do that, reach out. And that's something that I've done in the past, where we have figured out how to, under that payment model, to be able to really help people to be able to have the time to do a really good individualized assessment, because that is going to be the key to your success in the long term, is really finding out from people what they want to do as far as themes and conditions of employment. So important. All right, the next thing, if you're looking as far as people really being engaged and motivated to start to make this transformation from site-based services to community-based services, they really need to be engaged in planning out their day. And it needs to be, again, so individualized. This could be a logistical nightmare. Believe me, I know. I know I've often thought, listening to some webinars, like that would be great in practice, but it's not really practical, right? But there are ways that you can do this. And when you're using that individualized assessment, it's much easier to do individualized planning for the person. So it's really important for you to use some braiding of services, and hopefully your funding allows for that. If not, there's some advocacy that could be done there. But make sure that the person really says, hey, you know what, I'm really not a morning person, and I really want to go to work 5 days a week for 5 hours a day. And then the other times I want to be able to be supported to make community connections and have a social role, that kind of stuff. So it's important for you to use that assessment to lead into the planning process. The other thing is that a lot of states are really looking at that group discovery process. And so look at how you can use that as far as learning about the person to then place them in a job and train them in that job. All right, and then you knew I was going to talk about this, data collection. Data collection in your transformation is very, very important. A couple of things that it does for you is it evaluates your plan. How effective is your transformation plan? Do we need to reevaluate that plan? The other thing it helps you with that redirection of resources, once you're collecting some very specific data around employment services, you're able to then say, okay, I have this data point that I know that this is the funding, or these are the outcomes that we're seeing. I can start to redirect some of those resources to that source. And then to celebrate your successes. I mean, this is hard work. And so once you start to see some of those great numbers and great things happening for you, then celebrate them, send them out to the whole company and say, hey, we increased the people that work by 10% this month. That's great. And then also to monitor your basic quality, so your basic assurances in your program. Data is really important. All right, so here is just some information on some data that you could capture for employment-specific information. I'm not going to go through all of it just for the sake of time, but if you have any additional questions with this, please feel free to reach out. But yeah, this is just some data that you could take, and then some reasons behind that. So for example, if you want to find out how financially stable your organization is, you can look at productivity of job coaches or employment specialists or job developers. Look at their billable versus unbillable time. All right, this is for program health, more data points. So revenue received per source, average time in job development. Again, a lot of this helps you to forecast whether or not your revenue is coming in to support that transformation. And then as far as job seeker satisfaction, this is some great data points that you can keep for that. You know, the higher wage people make, that makes them a little bit happier too. Not the only thing that makes them happy, but it does make them a little bit happier. Also length of time in job development. People who are supported to really be connected to job development, engaged in job development, are more likely to be satisfied with the job that they receive. So, all right, so here are some additional resources that you can take advantage of, and these will be sent out to you later on with links that you can just click on them and go straight to them. But there's some really great resources that I personally have used when working with organizations in transformation. And this is just a fraction of the ones that are out there. So if I miss some, feel free to send me an email and let me know. It's always good to have a great resource library of people that can be helpful with All right. So I hope that you guys have gotten enough information to at least start your journey of transformation today. Like I said, there's a lot of information. This is a hot topic today about how to transform services. And so I think.
So there were a couple of questions. Did you see those? And then there's a gentleman who's had his hand raised a lot. And so I'll see. Someone would like you to explain the difference between community day program and day program services.
Oh, okay. So one, when we identify the community versus day program services, day program would be site-based, and then community might be the day program without walls, or with majority of it is based in the community.
So then there were just a couple other questions that I wanted to make sure. When you talk about leadership and transformational leaders, are you only talking about those people that are in formal leadership roles?
That's a great question. No, especially within the transformational leadership model, anyone can be a leader. Like we talked about with that new DSP coming online a week ago, that is a great leader, someone who can come with some additional outside information and really lead your organization in some new and innovative ways. So if you really look at that transformation leadership model, anybody can be a leader as long as they're taking that leadership role. Great question.
Okay, and then one other quick question that probably isn't a quick question is where have you seen success in reducing the reliance on kind of those more traditional day program services to really moving into employment? Are there particular areas where you've seen a huge amount of success geographically, or?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I think, and this is my experience, my world, how I see it. A lot of that is really driven by need, and so when funding sources change or lawsuits come into play, then it's required that people start to change. So in those areas, I think people are more extrinsically motivated to change. And so, looking at that, I think that there are some great information that APSI has for you as far as who are some of those leaders in transformation also.
Okay, thank you. And then if an individual is receiving services, supported employment services, can they receive pre-vocational services at the same time?
That's very state specific. And so the person who has that question, feel free to send me an email. I'll have my email address in just a bit, and I can help you figure some of that stuff out. But it's very individual. The other thing that I actually attended a training quite a few years ago at one organization that was in the state of California who had very limited ability to braid services. They had daily rates, not individual hourly rates. And they actually went to their funding source and presented a plan for transformation that included hourly rates, and were able to advocate for that to happen. And so I can't underemphasize how much advocacy is important to getting what people need.
And then is there a functioning model out there that includes much of the information from this webinar?
A functional model out there. Again, I think there's a lot of resources encased in the APSI website. They do also have some transformational trainings and things like that. That's a stumper. You guys have some good questions today. I can't think of an actual model that will help to go forward. That gowise.org is a place that I've learned a lot of information for transformation. And so I highly, highly recommend that you go there. WISE stands for Washington Initiative of Supported Employment. And they've done some amazing things around transformation and actually taught me quite a bit. So.
And do you have any data on how the difference are on individuals' level of functioning and getting jobs?
Say that one more time, sorry.
Is there data on people with different levels of functioning getting jobs?
Oh, that's a good question. Not that I know of, but I will say some anecdotal personal experience is that, um, you know, yes, it's important to validate that people with a few more barriers to employment might need a little bit more time to get employed, but it's not impossible. So I can definitely research that and see if I can find any more specific quantitative data for you.
Okay, and then going back to the question about functioning model, is there a structure for this process? Does that help?
I mean, I think like a structure for a transformation plan.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
You know, part of what I presented on today, that's part of the structure, kind of that, you know, communication plan, then mission, vision, values, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure if there's like a research-based, analyzed specific function for that. Again, I can research that and get some resources out if you need to.
Okay, and then could you repeat that website that you just gave in response to that answer a minute ago?
Yeah, let me get back that. I can put it on here so you can see it. It's the one on the bottom of training and consultation, that www.gowise.org. Great website.
Okay, and then, and I know we're running a little over, but there's just a few more questions. And so if you want to go, you certainly can go. If you want to hang out and hear the answer of the questions, that's great. For those organizations that are where their resources are tied into the facility, once community-based employment takes flight, what are organizations doing with these facilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's like the eternal question that I see, is that, you know, sometimes organizations have a tendency to use those sites as like a pre-vocational, like a train them place. And I highly suggest that we not do that. Sometimes it's important to find out if you need to get rid of those spaces. And, you know, some great organizations that I've been to have actually gotten rid of those spaces and gone to places where community-based employees might have a shared desk that they can come in and use as needed. But a lot of community-based employees, if they're really good community-based employees, can utilize their community-based resources to get what they need, like go to a coffee shop for internet, go to a library for printing things off, things like that. The more your community-based employees can actually be in the community, the more connections they can make. So I highly recommend a lot of organizations that are trying to focus on community, help people, staff themselves be in the community more to make those connections to then transfer to people supported.
Okay, and then just one more question. Do you feel that site day programs are beneficial?
You know, that's a question that's asked a lot right now. So I think that there's a time and place for lots of things, but I think that the more that people can be in the community, the better. So ideally, and some of the best organizations that personally I've seen, I've been really blessed to see a lot of really great ones, have not, the people that they support have not seen a need or desire to be at that site-based. A lot of regulations right now are requiring some site-based time. And so make sure that you identify what your regulation states and accommodate that. But I see that people being integrated into their community more and more as their desires are there, it's the best, most beneficial for them. Did I talk around that enough?
So thank you very much, Jen, for the presentation. As we mentioned at the beginning, we will save. We'll send you a link to the recorded webinar, and you'll be able to download the slide presentation from there. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much, and we apologize for the few technical problems that we had.
Great, thanks everyone. Feel free to email me if you have any questions.